Hello everyone! Thanks for clicking on today's video. My name is Sissy and I want to start off by apologizing for not posting a video last week. The week got away from me, it was very crazy busy, and I was unable to film any cooking or crafting, so I'm very sorry about that. Today's video is an apple strudel from a recipe I received from a cruise we took with the Disney Cruise Line, and I will share some photos of that paper recipe in another post. I started with making the vanilla cream sauce. To make the sauce, I used 2 cups of heavy cream, the recipe calls for half and half a tablespoon of vanilla extract, the recipe calls for an actual vanilla bean, 5 egg yolks, quarter cup of sugar, bit of salt, and 1 tablespoon of rum. The recipe called for dark, but I had golden. First thing I did was heat the heavy cream in a saucepan until it just started to boil, and while that was heating, I whisked together the eggs, sugar, salt, and vanilla extract. When the heavy cream was ready, I poured the heavy cream into the mixture, whisking it all together. Then the whole sauce goes back into the saucepan and I had to stir constantly and low until it thickened. I had a thermometer. The recipe says to heat until 170 degrees, but I'm not sure how reliable it was, so I just eyeballed the sauce. Finally, I strained the sauce through a sieve back into the bowl. After cleaning, of course, no egg contamination here. Covered it and threw it into the fridge for a day until I was ready for the rest of the recipe. To make the filling, I peeled, cored, and sliced. It was supposed to be thinly sliced. I did okay on that ish. A bunch of Granny Smith apples. The recipe calls for 2 pounds, but I had gotten a bag of 3 pounds, so I just sliced them all up and used the remaining apples for an apple pie later in the week. Then I put them in the bowl with 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and half a cup of sugar and rested them overnight in the fridge. The last prep I did the day before was to take 2 tablespoons of golden rum and pour them over a quarter cup of cranberries. The recipe calls for golden raisins, but they said you could substitute for other fruits, so why not? And let them soak overnight. The recipe also calls for half a cup of walnuts, but my family is allergic to walnuts and we don't really like the texture of nuts in desserts, so I skipped the nuts altogether. The next day, I took phyllo dough and began the tedious task of laying it out. I knew phyllo dough was fragile and really thin, but my goodness, this was not easy. I followed the instructions on the package to thaw them out and keep them from drying as I melted half a cup of butter to spread between the 8 sheets of phyllo dough. After putting the sheets together and putting butter on top of the final layer, I spread 1.5 cups of graham cracker crumbles on top of the dough, followed by the apples and the cranberries. Then I carefully folded it over. The recipe said to fold in the sides, but I don't think the phyllo dough was long enough for that, and it still came out okay. The roll is not as tight as a Swiss roll, so it's more like making sure the seams kind of touch each other enough to cover the filling all over. Then I took some of the remaining melted butter and brushed the top and sprinkled a mix of quarter cup of sugar and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, although that was a lot, so you could probably do quite a bit less, over the top of the strudel. Then I let it sit at room temperature for an hour to rest, then baked it in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. By not making dough from scratch and substituting for phyllo dough, this recipe actually wasn't terribly difficult. In fact, it was kind of fun to make this as this was my first time working with phyllo dough. Man, that stuff is fragile, but I still think it's a heck of a lot easier to deal with than ensuring I have a 36-inch round table I can walk around all sides and create paper thin dough and doing the window test. So, yeah, I'd recommend the phyllo dough in spite of its delicateness. Would you try this version of apple strudel? What kind of fruit would you use with the apples? And do you have a favorite kind of apple to use? Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you again soon.